16 cyclists died and nearly 1,300 were injured in crashes with cars in 2015, according to the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. I'd like to welcome everyone to our Philadelphia Accident and Injury Google Hangout. My name is Rene, and I'm here with Rand Spear today, Philadelphia's car accident lawyer. Today we're going to start a two-part hangout. Part one will be about tips for motorists to avoid accidents with cyclists, and part two will be tips for cyclists to avoid crashes with motorists. Rand, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Rene. This is truly the dog days of summer. It's excessively hot up here, high 90s, low hundreds. It's really unbelievable how hot it is, and hopefully everyone will be able to stay indoors and stay cool.
Well, thank God we don't have the flooding mishap that's going on in, I think it's Louisiana or wherever.
I know, what a tragedy.
It just looks dreadful.
I know.
Maybe you can tell us about any trends in the number of car accidents involving cyclists.
Well, you know, the number of crashes per year has been fairly consistent. You know, it's usually in the $1,200 to $1,300 $1,200 to $1,300 range. The high, I think, was 2013. But the troubling number is the number of deaths. We're the second highest over the last 5 years in 2015 with 16 deaths. And the other thing is most accidents involving cyclists are injured at intersections, but yet most were killed at non-intersections. So that's a very troubling statistic that we all need to be very careful about when there are cyclists near us and we're operating a motor vehicle.
Well, those are interesting facts, and I concur. You know, it's troubling when people die. Maybe you can give some tips for motorists so they can avoid these deadly accidents with bicycles.
Absolutely. You know, number one, you have to appreciate the cyclist vulnerability. You know, you're in a car that's probably, I don't know, 2 tons or more. The average bike is 20 pounds. So recognize that you know, are operating a dangerous vehicle with respect to someone who's on a bicycle. If there's an accident, odds are they're going to get hurt badly because they have nothing around them to protect them. The second thing I would say is know cyclists' rights. You know, the traffic laws apply to cyclists. In many occasions, they have the right of way, and you just have to be aware of that, and you have to adjust your attitude. You know, so many people, they think that the cyclist is in their way, but really what you need to do is think of them as equal. They're entitled to be on the roadway just as we are in motor vehicles. So once you understand that and you take a step back and you realize they have the right to be there, then I think you'll be much more focused on where they are, what they're doing, and take all necessary precautions to avoid any type of accident. The other thing I would say is that you want to spare them the right hook. And by that I mean cars that are making a right turn at an intersection should be very careful to watch out for cyclists, because very often they're on the side of the road or they're crossing at the intersection, and they sometimes could be difficult to observe. You're not always focused on looking for the cyclists. So when you slow down and you know you're going to turn and make a right, you want to just check your surrounding area very carefully. You know, hesitate if need be. Make sure that the intersection, it really is clear for you to make the right turn. And the same thing with the left turn. Again, it's oftentimes difficult to see an oncoming cyclist. You're not always trained to look for the cyclist. You know, you've got plenty of time to complete that left turn. So slow down, proceed with caution, you know, give a second look. Make sure that that intersection is absolutely clear for you to make that left turn. And of course, you want to give the cyclist 4 feet of clearance. It's Pennsylvania law. And then lastly, a lot of cyclists get hurt because the motorist opens up the door to get out. And when they do that, they don't realize that there's a cyclist coming up behind them. So just before you open that door, look to your left, look behind you, and just make sure that no one is coming up behind you.
Oh, those are tremendous tips. 4 feet of clearance, opening up the door. I mean, driving habits in South Florida are maybe not the same as Pennsylvania, but coming into intersections and making stops at stop signs, I'm always concerned about somebody just coming in front of me without, having had the time to really look clearly. So I guess it's always good to slow down.
Well, it is good to slow down, and what's interesting is, in Florida, the weather is warm and beautiful 12 months of the year. So you sort of become accustomed to having cyclists on the roadway 12 months of the year. Up here on the East Coast, it's a little bit different. We go through months and months of really bad weather when it's snowing and rainy and icy and cold, and so there's a lot less cyclists on the road, and so we have the tendency to sort of not pay attention and forget about that when all of a sudden the weather becomes beautiful again and there's an abundance of cyclists on the roadway. Here in Philadelphia, they now have these stands where you can rent the bike for a morning or an afternoon and cycle around the city. So I'm seeing more and more people on bicycles as time goes by. So it really is something that we all have to pay attention to and all be familiar with to avoid these serious injuries that can occur with these types of accidents.
Yeah, I think we can't be mindful enough. Like you said, you're wielding a dangerous weapon in a 2,000-pound vehicle, and the cyclist in many instances has no chance. Has your firm handled any cases involving clients that were injured while riding a bike? Is there anyone that comes to mind?
We've handled many, many cases over my 30 or so years that I've been practicing law. We've handled so many cases. Philadelphia and this area is an area where there are just a ton of cyclists. So accidents happen on a daily basis involving cyclists. We just wrapped up one case where a bus went by and struck our client who was on a cycle. And unfortunately, the client really did get hurt very badly, had a little head trauma, had some cognitive deficits, and we ended up taking depositions and filing suit, and it did resolve right before trial. The client was happy, the client was satisfied. But at the end of the day, all we can really recover for them is money. We really can't make them better. We can't make them whole again. So I just caution everyone to just be as careful as possible. Observe the roadway, observe people on the roadway, slow down just a little bit, and we should all be a little bit safer.
Yeah, I don't think any amount of money can really replace a quality of life that you experienced before an accident. So, I agree with you. It's like you do the best you can. It sounds like you did this in this particular case.
Absolutely.
If you have a case in Pennsylvania or New Jersey related to a car accident or any other type of accident, possibly, a pedestrian or cyclist accident, please call Rand Spear, the accident lawyer, at 888-373-4LAW. That's the numeral 4 and the word law. Or you can visit the firm at www.randspear.com. Again, Rand, I'm always amazed at the depth of your knowledge when it comes to these kinds of accidents and injuries. So it's always a pleasure to listen to you.
Thank you, Rene.
I want to thank everyone for participating today, and I invite our audience to come back and listen to part 2 next week, when we'll be discussing, what cyclists could do, to avoid these incidents. That's all for now, and goodbye. But again, remember, information contained in this video should not be construed as legal advice. Content is for information purposes only. Nothing contained herein shall constitute an attorney-client relationship.